I need you to hear something, and I need you to hear it before September gets here. I've spent the last 3 weeks going through the June USDA Food Price Outlook, the American Farm Bureau's cattle inventory report, commodity trading data, and shipping manifests that most people will never read. And what I'm seeing is not good. Not catastrophic, not the end of the world, but not good. There are specific items sitting on your grocery store shelves right now, today, in July, that are either going to cost you significantly more by October or are going to become genuinely harder to find. And by the time most people notice, the window to prepare will already be closing. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to walk you through exactly what's about to change, why it's happening, and most importantly, what you and I can do about it right now while we still have time. Let's start with the one that's going to hit the most families the hardest, and that's beef. I've been talking about this for months, but the numbers just keep getting worse. According to the USDA's Economic Research Service, the data they released just last month in June, the U.S. cattle herd has decreased to its lowest level in 75 years. That puts us back to 1951. The January inventory report from the American Farm Bureau showed total cattle at 86.2 million head, down another 300,000 from 2025. And here's the part that matters for your kitchen. Beef and veal prices were already 12.9% higher in May 2026 than they were in May 2025. The USDA is now predicting beef prices will increase another 7.5% over the full year, with a worst-case prediction interval reaching as high as 12%. NPR ran a piece at the end of May calling it exactly what it is, a 75-year low driven by drought, rising costs, and a cattle cycle that won't even begin to recover until at least 2028. So when you walk into the store this fall and the ground beef section looks a little thinner, with higher prices on what's left, this is why. The cattle aren't there, the calves aren't there. And the border with Mexico, which normally brings in 1.2 to 1.5 million head of feeder cattle a year, has been closed to imported livestock to combat screwworm. And that constraint is keeping prices elevated through 2026 and into 2027. And it's not just the number of cattle. The situation is more complicated than that. The U.S.-Mexico border has been closed to imported livestock, including beef cattle, to combat the spread of New World screwworm. In a normal year, approximately 1.2 to 1.5 million head of cattle placed into feedlots for beef production are imported from Mexico. That supply is gone right now. On the other side, Argentina reached a new trade agreement with the U.S. in February to allow some temporary duty-free imports, but industry watchers say that's a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches. The Farm Bureau's own report says cattle inventory will likely not expand until at least 2028. That means what you're paying for beef today is not a spike. It's the beginning of a multi-year pricing reality. Meanwhile, wholesale beef prices were 15.9% higher in May 2026 than a year ago, and farm-level cattle prices jumped 16.9% year over year. Those wholesale and farm-level prices always flow downstream to your grocery store, usually with about a 2 to 3 month lag. Now here's what I want you to do about it. If beef is a regular part of your family's meals, this fall is the time to start pressure canning ground beef and stew meat while you can still get it at current prices. Pressure canning beef at 10 pounds of pressure for 75 minutes for pints or 90 minutes for quarts gives you shelf-stable protein that lasts for years. You can also start stretching your beef with beans and lentils in recipes like chili, soup, and casseroles, which cuts your per-serving cost nearly in half without sacrificing the flavor your family expects. And honestly, if you haven't already, start rotating chicken and pork into your weekly meals more often. Pork prices are only predicted to increase about 1.9% this year, which is a fraction of what beef is doing. Your wallet will thank you. Now let's talk about something that's affecting every single aisle in your grocery store, and most people don't even realize it's happening. I'm talking about the tariff wave. There's been a lot of noise about tariffs since 2025, but here's what the data actually shows. According to analysts at Spins, a market research firm, tariff-driven cost increases typically take 12 to 18 months to fully pass through to retail shelves. The tariffs that went into effect in the spring of 2025, the ones everyone was talking about on the news, those costs have been working through the system. Manufacturers used up existing inventory. They absorbed what they could. They renegotiated contracts. But that buffer is expiring right now, in mid-2026. And that means this fall is when you and I are going to start feeling the full weight of those tariffs at the checkout line. A study from Yale Budget Lab estimated that current tariff policy is costing the average household over $1,600 a year in real income. The Tax Foundation puts the number even higher for some families, estimating that tariff-related costs could add up to $2,500 per household in 2026 when you factor in the full ripple effect across goods and groceries. And a Michigan State University economist who testified before Congress pointed out something critical that I think everyone needs to understand. Even if tariffs are later reduced or removed, food prices typically remain elevated. They're what economists call downward sticky. They go up fast and they come down slow, if they come down at all. He specifically said that political promises that food prices will come down are not supported by the data. So anyone waiting for prices to drop back to where they were in 2023, I'm sorry, but that is not how food markets work. So what does that look like in specific items? Let me walk you through it, because the details matter here. Coffee is one of the biggest ones, and if you're someone who starts every morning with a cup, you really need to hear this. The United States imposed a 50% tariff on imports from Brazil, which is the world's largest coffee producer by a wide margin. Colombia, which supplies about 20% of our market, is subject to a 10% tariff. On top of the tariffs, Brazil has been dealing with climate shocks that reduced yields, and Vietnam, the world's second-largest coffee producer, has been fighting drought. The result is that the Consumer Price Index data shows coffee prices already rose 21% year over year. Industry analysts are calling it the most sustained coffee price increase in decades, and futures markets suggest there's no relief coming soon. Unless trade negotiations change direction significantly, your morning cup is going to keep getting more expensive through the fall and well into next year. What I've done personally is buy an extra 3 to 5 pounds of whole bean coffee every time I shop, vacuum seal it, and store it in a cool, dark place. Whole beans stored that way will stay fresh for 12 to 18 months without any noticeable loss of quality. Ground coffee loses its flavor much faster, so if you're going to stockpile, stick with whole beans. If you drink coffee every day, that's literally money in the bank. Now, olive oil. This one has a lot going on at once. The USDA predicted a 10% global production decline for the 2025 to 26 crop year. Greece is dealing with climate-related production failures. Turkey's olive harvest is projected to fall drastically from last year's 475,000 tons, with producers blaming harsh weather during flowering. And then on top of the production issues, you've got the shipping crisis. With conflict in the Middle East and disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices surged past $112 a barrel in March. That matters because fuel accounts for 50 to 60% of the total operating cost of shipping goods by sea. The CEO of Dioleo, which is the world's largest olive oil bottler, the company behind Bertolli, Carapelli, and Carbonell, came out and said it directly. Supply won't be short, but costs will rise. On top of all that, the U.S. has imposed base tariffs of 15% on agricultural imports from the European Union, including olive oil. So you've got production declines, shipping cost increases, and tariff surcharges all hitting the same bottle of olive oil at the same time. If you use olive oil regularly for cooking, buy an extra bottle or two now and store them in a cool, dark cabinet. Olive oil has a shelf life of 18 to 24 months unopened, so there's no waste involved. You're just buying ahead of the curve. Let's move on to fresh produce, because this is where the tariff impact is going to be most visible on your shelves this fall. And here's why. The United States imports a massive amount of its fresh produce from Mexico. According to the USDA, Mexico supplies 69% of U.S. vegetable imports and 51% of fresh fruit imports. We're talking about tomatoes, avocados, limes, mangoes, bell peppers, cucumbers. The U.S. has announced tariffs of up to 25% on goods from Mexico unless they're exempted under the USMCA trade agreement, which itself is up for renegotiation in July 2026. A produce distributor in Arizona told the Council on Foreign Relations that during summer months, the U.S. sources most produce domestically. But as temperatures drop and the domestic growing season ends, American consumers should expect shortages at the end of the year. One farmer told that same CFR team that he's only farming half his acreage this year to save capital and make sure he survives the next 2 years. When your suppliers are cutting production because they can't plan around trade policy, that is a problem that's going to show up on your shelves. What can you do? This is canning season, folks. This is the most important canning season in years, and I mean that. If you have access to a farmer's market or a local produce stand, right now in July and August, this is the time to buy tomatoes by the bushel and can them. Water bath canned tomatoes, whether you're doing crushed, diced, whole, or sauce, that is the single best investment you can make this summer. A bushel of tomatoes costs roughly $20 to $25 right now from a local grower. From that single bushel, you can fill 15 to 20 quart jars of canned tomatoes. Compare that to buying canned tomatoes at the store at $2 or more per can. And those store prices are going up because of the steel tariffs I'll talk about in a minute. The math is overwhelmingly in your favor. I'm also buying extra peppers and freezing them because a frozen bag of diced bell peppers does just as well in a winter soup or casserole as a fresh one, at a fraction of what you'll pay in November when those peppers are being imported from Mexico at a 25% markup. Same thing with corn on the cob. Buy it cheap right now at your local stand, cut it off the cob, blanch it for 4 minutes, and freeze it in quart bags. You'll thank yourself in January. And for avocados and limes, the items that don't can or freeze well, just know that those are going to be the ones that spike the hardest this fall. Plan your meals accordingly. Now I need to talk about something that a lot of people aren't even aware of yet, and that's Italian pasta. This one caught me off guard when I first read about it. The U.S. Department of Commerce proposed anti-dumping duties on 13 of Italy's biggest pasta exporters that would have combined with existing tariffs to create a total duty of around 107%, more than double the cost. Now, more recently, they sharply reduced those proposed duties, so the worst-case scenario appears to have been avoided for now. But here's the thing about trade policy in 2026. It changes fast. The 15% base tariff on EU agricultural products is still in place, and the USMCA renegotiation could trigger retaliatory moves that change the calculation again. If your family goes through a lot of pasta, and most American families do, buying a few extra boxes every time you shop is just common sense right now. Dried pasta stored properly in a cool, dry place lasts for 2 to 3 years. There is absolutely no downside to having an extra 20 or 30 boxes in your pantry. Let me also touch on sugar, because the USDA data on this one is striking. Sugar and sweets are currently the fastest rising food category in the entire Consumer Price Index. Prices rose 1.3% in just 1 month, from April to May 2026. And the USDA is predicting a 6.7% increase for the full year, with a worst-case prediction interval of over 10%. If you do any kind of baking or canning that requires sugar, buy it now. A 25-pound bag of granulated sugar stored in a sealed container in a dry place will last indefinitely. I bought 3 extra bags last month, and I don't regret it one bit. And then there's orange juice. And honestly, this one breaks my heart a little. Florida used to produce around 244 million boxes of oranges a year back in the late 1990s. The predicted harvest for 2026 is 12 million boxes. 12. That is the lowest since the 1930s. Citrus greening disease has been devastating the groves for years. Hurricanes have uprooted entire orchards. Processing facilities in the state have dropped by nearly 70%. And a severe cold snap in February 2026 may have damaged what was left even further. On top of all that, Minute Maid and Coca-Cola have discontinued their frozen concentrate products. So you've got shrinking production and shrinking product lines at the same time. If your family drinks orange juice, I would strongly recommend looking into frozen concentrate from other brands while it's still available, or switching to buying oranges in season and juicing them yourself when you can get them at a reasonable price. You can also freeze fresh squeezed orange juice in mason jars, with an inch of headspace, and it keeps beautifully for 6 months or more. Now here's one more that connects everything together, and it's something most people never think about. Canned goods. Not a specific food, but the container itself. Tariffs on imported steel directly raise the cost of tin cans and packaging. That cost increase hits every single canned product in the store, from beans to vegetables to soups to fruit. Michigan State University's agricultural economist pointed this out in his congressional testimony. Tariffs on steel raise the cost of cans, which raises production costs for manufacturers, which raises prices at the grocery store. It's a chain reaction. And it means that even if the food inside the can is domestically produced, the cost of putting it in a can and getting it to you is going up. This is another reason why home canning is so valuable right now. When you can your own food, you're using reusable jars. Yes, you need lids and bands, but a case of regular mouth lids costs a few dollars and seals 12 jars. Compare that to the retail markup on commercially canned goods that now includes tariff-inflated packaging costs. Every jar you fill yourself is a jar that's not subject to those supply chain pressures. Now let me pull all of this together, because I don't want you walking away from this feeling overwhelmed. Here's the big picture. We are not looking at empty shelves. I want to be very clear about that. What we are looking at is a fall season, where multiple cost pressures are converging at the same time. Tariffs that took 12 to 18 months to work through the system are finally hitting retail shelves. The cattle herd is at a 75-year low. Coffee and olive oil are being squeezed by trade policy and shipping disruptions simultaneously. Fresh produce is going to get more expensive as we transition from domestic summer harvests to imported winter supply. And the cost of packaging itself is going up because of steel tariffs. None of these things alone would be a crisis, but all of them hitting at the same time, in the same few months, is going to put real pressure on grocery budgets this fall. The USDA's overall prediction is that food prices will increase 3.2% in 2026. That might not sound like much, but that's on top of the increases we already absorbed in 2023, 2024, and 2025. It compounds. And for specific categories like beef and sugar, the actual increases are far higher than that average. When Helios AI, a platform that aggregates billions of data points on global commodity risks, told the Packer that they predict food prices could rise as much as 18% by the end of 2026, I take that seriously. They're the same team that predicted the Brazilian citrus crisis 8 months before Reuters and 12 months before the USDA. So here's my simple plan for you. This summer, while produce is abundant and prices haven't fully jumped yet, focus on 3 things. First, can everything you can. Tomatoes, green beans, peaches, whatever is growing locally and available at a good price. Every jar you fill now is a jar you don't have to buy at inflated prices in December. Second, stock up on shelf-stable staples that you know your family uses. Pasta, rice, beans, sugar, coffee, cooking oil. Buy a little extra every week. You don't have to do it all at once. Just add $5 or $10 of extras to every grocery trip between now and September. Third, start rotating your protein. If you've been relying on beef 3 or 4 nights a week, start moving toward chicken, pork, beans, and eggs. Not because beef is going away, but because the math is clear. At 12 to 13% higher year over year and climbing, beef is going to eat a disproportionate share of your food budget unless you adjust. I've been doing this work for a long time. I've watched commodity cycles come and go. I've read the USDA reports every month for more years than I care to admit. I've tracked tariff developments. I've studied what happened during the 2020 supply chain disruptions and the egg crisis of 2025. And what I can tell you is that the families who do well through times like these are not the ones who panic. They're not the ones who run out and spend $3,000 at Costco in a single weekend and then feel guilty about it for months. They're the ones who pay attention, make a plan, and take small consistent action while there's still time. It's the families who add $10 of extra pantry staples to every grocery trip. It's the families who spend one Saturday afternoon in August putting up 20 jars of tomato sauce with their kids. It's the families who look at the price of ground beef and say, you know what? We're going to do a bean-based chili tonight instead, and nobody complains because the recipe is that good. You don't need a bunker. You don't need a $10,000 freeze dryer, though I won't judge you if you have one. You need a well-thought-out pantry, a few extra bags of rice and sugar, some canning jars and lids, and the willingness to adjust your meals based on what the market is actually doing rather than what you wish it was doing. That's not deprivation. That's intelligence. That's the same thing our grandmothers did, and their grandmothers before them. They read the signs, they made adjustments, and their families ate well because of it. Your pantry is your first line of defense. It always has been. And right now, in July 2026, you still have time to build it before the fall pressure hits. Not unlimited time, but enough time. So let's use that time wisely. If this information was helpful to you, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. A neighbor, a friend, your sister, someone at church. Because the people who do best in situations like this are the people who were told what was coming while they still had time to act. And if you're new here, consider subscribing because I put out new videos every Tuesday and Friday with practical information just like this. No panic, no politics, just straight talk about what's happening and what we can do about it. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and I'll see you in the next one.